Most people die never having met themselves. And the worst part? They don't even realize it. They just keep going. Through jobs, through relationships, through decades, wearing someone else's face, chasing someone else's definition of success. They smile when they're supposed to. Achieve what they're told to. But beneath the surface, something never quite settles. I know that feeling. I lived it. It's like being almost happy. Like your life is fine. On paper, you have the right answers. You're performing the part well. But deep inside, there's a silence, a numbness, a whisper that starts as a question and eventually grows into a storm. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, shirt crisp, posture trained, expression convincing, and still, something felt off. It wasn't dramatic, just wrong. Like I was watching someone else live my life, and they were doing a decent job. But I wasn't in the room. Carl Rogers said, "What I am is good enough, if I would only be it openly." At first, I didn't understand that. I thought authenticity meant being loud about who you are. But he wasn't talking about volume. He was talking about alignment. Because I wasn't aligned. I was successful and disconnected, surrounded and unseen. My outer world was moving, but my inner world had stalled. That's when the unraveling began. Not a breakdown, not a crisis, just a quiet cracking. The beginning of a split I could no longer ignore. This isn't about self-improvement. It's not about becoming better, stronger, more polished. It's about returning, remembering, unmasking. And that return doesn't start with answers. It starts with a strange kind of grief, the realization that you've been away from yourself for a very long time. We're taught to grow by adding skills, titles, muscles, followers. But no one tells you that the real growth begins with subtraction, not becoming more, but becoming less of what you're not. That's where I found myself, standing in the life I'd built, accomplishments, roles, identities, and wondering if any of it was actually mine. Rogers once wrote, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." That idea broke something open in me, because for so long I had believed the opposite, that change required rejection. That transformation was a war I had to wage against my flaws. But the more I tried to fix myself, the further I drifted from who I really was. I started to peel back the layers. I stopped forcing laughter in conversations that drained me. I let silence live longer between words. I stopped pretending to be fine. And then I read the story of Mary Johnson, whose only son was killed by a teenage boy named O'Shea. Years later, she forgave him. Not in theory, not in silence. She met him. She embraced him. And when he was released from prison, she invited him to live next door. She looked into the eyes of the boy who took everything from her and said, "I love you, son." I couldn't breathe after reading that, because I realized acceptance isn't passive. It's revolutionary. It's the most disarming force we have. O'Shea didn't transform because someone punished him. He transformed because someone saw the part of him no one else had ever looked for. The part buried beneath shame, the part still worthy. That story stayed with me. It haunted me. Because if a boy who committed the worst mistake could be transformed through love, what was possible for the rest of us? What could be healed in me if I stopped running from the parts I didn't like? What if the self I've been searching for wasn't ahead of me, but underneath? That's when I remembered something. The Golden Buddha. A statue in Bangkok, once covered in clay to hide its value during war. forgotten for centuries, until one day a crack revealed the gold beneath. We're not broken, we're buried. But becoming your authentic self isn't about construction, it's about excavation. And that journey starts when you finally stop asking, "Who should I be?" and dare to ask, "Who have I always been?" before the world told me to hide it. There's a moment in every journey where the ground starts to give, not all at once. It's subtle, a slow unraveling, and if you're not paying attention, you'll call it stress or burnout or just a rough patch. But if you listen closely, it's something else, something deeper. It's the sound of the false self cracking. I didn't fall apart. I faded. I stopped laughing at things that used to make me smile. Conversations felt like scenes in a play I couldn't exit. I said, "I'm fine," so often it lost all meaning. There was no breakdown, just a growing absence, like I was becoming a ghost inside my own life. That's when the mirror came, not the one in the bathroom, the other one. The moments where life holds up something honest, someone's eyes, an unexpected silence, a question you can't deflect, and you see yourself clearly. No filters, no edits, just the truth staring back. Carl Rogers called it incongruence, that split between the person you show the world and the one you actually are. He said the further those selves drift apart, the more we suffer. And I was suffering, not with drama, with dullness, a kind of spiritual erosion. I was erasing myself a little more every day just to keep the peace. One night, I caught my own eyes in the mirror and said it out loud. Not for anyone else, just for me. I don't know who I am. It wasn't a confession. It was a reckoning. That line didn't fix anything, but it broke the spell. Because I wasn't pretending anymore. And sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. Just stop pretending. I remembered the story of the musk deer, a creature from an old Indian parable. It smells a beautiful scent in the wind and spends its life chasing it through forests and mountains, never realizing that the fragrance comes from within its own body. It dies, still searching, never knowing it carried the thing it longed for all along. That's what we do. We chase love, meaning purpose, as if they live out there, in someone's approval, in the next goal, in the mirror's approval, never realizing the thing we ache for has always been inside us, waiting. But here's what no one tells you. The descent is necessary. Not because you're broken, because there are parts of you that only speak in the dark. And if you're willing to go there, to sit in that quiet and not run, you start to hear them. I sat, I listened, and what I heard wasn't failure. It wasn't weakness. It was the voice of someone who had been silenced, someone tender, someone true. The mirror didn't lie. It never does. But it only shows you what you're ready to see. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I used to think healing was something you did alone, a solo mission. Go off, fix yourself, come back better. But that's not how it works. Because there's a kind of transformation that only happens when you're seen, not improved, not instructed, just seen. It happened in a parking lot of all places. A friend asked how I was doing, and this time I didn't say, "Fine." I said the truth. I'm not okay. And they didn't flinch. They didn't offer advice or pivot or fill the silence. They just stood there holding space like it was sacred. That moment did something to me. It cracked open a door I didn't know existed. Carl Rogers wrote that when someone really hears you without judgment, without trying to fix you, it feels damn good. That's because we live in a world obsessed with fixing. Even our love comes with a to-do list. But true empathy isn't about fixing. It's about presence. It's about saying, I'm with you here, exactly as you are. That kind of presence is rare, and when you find it, it's like lighting a match in a dark room. I thought about Daryl Davis, a black musician who did the unthinkable. He sat down with members of the Ku Klux Klan, not to shame them, not to debate, just to talk, to listen, to ask questions no one else dared to ask. And slowly, one by one, they changed. Over 200 Klansmen left the Klan, not because Daryl argued better, but because he made them feel seen as humans, beneath the hate, beneath the fear, beneath the armor. And when people feel seen, the walls start to fall. That's the power of empathy. It doesn't yell, it doesn't push, it invites. It sits with you in your shadow and whispers, you're still worth loving. That's what lit the flame in me. Not a breakthrough or a ritual or a retreat. Just the experience of being accepted, fully, without performance. And when someone does that for you, when they witness your truth and don't leave, it rewires something in your nervous system. It tells the parts of you that were exiled, you can come home now. That flame was small at first, but it was real. And real is all it takes. Real is how a fire begins. Change doesn't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it's quieter than a whisper. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like soft breath after a storm, like stillness, like the first time you say something out loud that you've only ever thought in the dark, and the world doesn't end. Carl Rogers talked about the fully functioning person. Not someone who's flawless, but someone who's open, fluid, honest, present. A person not bound by masks or rigid roles, but by an inner congruence, a life lived in alignment with the truth. I thought that kind of life was reserved for rare souls, the enlightened, the healed, but now I see it's not about becoming someone different. It's about becoming someone honest. And honesty isn't loud. It's subtle. It looks like saying, I don't know without shame. Like saying no when you've always said yes. Like choosing solitude, not as escape, but as home. It was in these small moments that I noticed something shifting. Not because I was forcing growth, but because I had stopped resisting truth. The mask was off. The voice inside me was no longer edited. I wasn't trying to be someone anymore. I was simply being. That's when I remembered the golden Buddha, how monks once covered it in clay to protect it from invaders, how over time they forgot what was underneath. Centuries later, a crack revealed the truth. Beneath the dust, the dullness, the disguise, there was gold. That story wasn't about a statue. It was about us. We all cover our essence to survive, layering ourselves with shoulds and expectations, dimming ourselves so others aren't blinded by the light. But eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. The disguise begins to suffocate the thing it was meant to protect. My cracks weren't my shame, they were my reveal. And beneath those cracks, there was fire. Not a destructive one, not chaos, but clarity. The fire burned away the lies I'd believed about myself, that I was too much or not enough, that love must be earned, that worth must be proven. And in that burning, I didn't disappear. I emerged. There's a moment in becoming where the old you clings for life, not because it was true, but because it was familiar. Letting go of that version can feel like death, but it's not the end. It's a metamorphosis. The caterpillar doesn't grow wings. It dissolves first. It unravels into nothing before it becomes something new. That's what the fire was. Dissolution. And then, wings. This, I finally understood, is what Carl Rogers meant by becoming your authentic self. Not a self you invent, but the one revealed in the absence of fear. The self that remains when you stop performing, when you stop hiding, and when you emerge from that fire. It's not with a new identity. It's with a truth you've known all along. You just stopped running from it. There's a point in every story where the hero returns, but they don't come back with trophies, they come back with truth. I returned to my life, not with a new name or title, but with a new relationship to myself. I wasn't louder, I wasn't more confident, but I was aligned, and that changed everything. The places that once felt familiar felt different. The roles I used to play felt tight, like clothes I'd outgrown. Some people celebrated that shift. Others didn't know what to do with it. But I didn't need them to. Because something had changed. I had stopped asking, what do they want from me? And started asking, what do I want to bring? Carl Rogers believed that when someone is fully accepted, they begin to live with a kind of radical openness, and that openness is contagious. When you show up real, you give others permission to do the same. That's what started happening. I didn't have to push. I just had to be, and slowly the world around me began to respond, not to my performance, but to my presence. I began to attract people who weren't looking for perfect. They were looking for real. I stopped hiding, and the parts of me I had once buried, the softness, the questions, the fire, they began to lead. The mask had kept me safe, but it had also kept me small. And once I set it down, I didn't become fearless. I became honest. And in that honesty, I found power, not the kind that dominates, the kind that liberates. Joseph Campbell once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." But it's more than a privilege, it's a responsibility. Because when you remember who you are, you don't just change your life, you change the room, you change the story. You become a mirror for others to see themselves more clearly. So let me ask you what I had to ask myself. What are you still hiding? And what would happen if you let it be seen? If something in this story spoke to you, leave a trace, a comment, a sentence, a memory of when you remembered yourself. Because the journey back to your authentic self doesn't end here. It begins, and somewhere beneath the dust, beneath the doubt, beneath the clay, there's gold, and it's been waiting for you all along.